I was excited when my partner Jamie and I moved into our dream home on a quiet cul-de-sac in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm Alex, 28, and a freelance writer, while Jamie, 26, works as a graphic designer. At first, our new beginning filled us with hope. But soon, unsettling signs crept in from the house next door. Strange flickering lights at odd hours and eerie whispers piercing the silent nights. Before we knew it, our fresh start was about to become a living nightmare. It all began on a chilly autumn evening when I first noticed odd behavior emanating from the old Victorian across the street. While Jamie and I were unpacking in our modest living room, a peculiar glow caught my eye from a dusty window. I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding, and watched as dancing shadows hinted at secrets hidden behind drawn curtains. There was an inexplicable quality to that house, as if it guarded dark mysteries too terrible to mention. Over the next few days, the phenomenon grew bolder. At midnight, the house burst into erratic flashes that resembled silent signals, and a low, unsettling hum seeped into our nights. I found myself lying awake, questioning the nature of the eerie sounds and the presence I felt. Every time I passed the boundary of our yard, an unseen force seemed to watch me, setting my nerves on edge and leaving me with the foreboding sense that our peaceful life was about to shatter. A few evenings later, while strolling along the quiet street, I caught fleeting glimpses of a gaunt figure barely visible behind heavy drapes. The chill in the air deepened as if nature itself was warning me away from an imminent danger. I scribbled down every detail in a small notebook, desperate to understand what lay behind those mysterious occurrences. That night, as I stared out into the darkness from our back window, I felt the unmistakable weight of an unseen presence, silent witness to every fearful heartbeat. The first seed of terror had been planted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Determined to make sense of the unsettling events, Jamie and I began our own investigation. I started taking long walks around the block, each step filled with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Every time I neared the decrepit house next door, it felt as if invisible eyes were tracking my every move. Rumors in the neighborhood hinted at a reclusive old man living in isolation, but details were sparse. One foggy evening, I crept closer to the worn fence that separated our yards, and through a gap, I saw him, a thin, elderly figure whose presence seemed more ghost than man. His eyes were deep-set and filled with an indescribable sorrow as he stood motionless, a silent sentinel of his crumbling domain. I watched from behind a large oak tree as he slowly emerged onto his porch, engaging in what appeared to be a ritualistic act. His head tilted upwards, and for a brief moment, I could swear he was communing with forces beyond human reach. The unsettling scene sent shivers down my spine, and I hastily retreated back to the safety of our home. That night, the usual calm was replaced by an almost tangible sense of dread. The wind carried a mournful tune, and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows blended with the distant echo of his mutterings, leaving me questioning the boundary between reality and something far more sinister. Later, while discussing the encounter with Jamie over a quiet dinner, I noticed the growing worry in her eyes. Though she tried to downplay it as mere eccentricity, the fearful tremor in her voice told another story. We both agreed that something unnatural lurked behind those time-worn walls, a secret that had begun to unravel the fabric of our once tranquil life. As the nights grew longer and the strange occurrences escalated, our home turned into a battleground of creeping dread. One fateful evening, I was startled awake by a series of frantic knocks on our door. Peering through the peephole, I found nothing but a dark corridor and a trail of muddy footprints leading ominously toward the neighbor's property. My pulse raced as I wondered if these were the early signs of the pact I had long feared. The silence that followed was deafening, leaving an indelible chill on my soul. I couldn't shake the sensation that the silent watcher's influence was now reaching out for us. The following day, driven by an insatiable need for answers, I embarked on a closer inspection of the neighbor's decrepit garden. Amidst tangled vines and peeling paint, I discovered strange, archaic symbols etched into the wood of an old porch. They appeared deliberately carved, remnants of a ritual from a forgotten time. The symbols resonated with the murmurs of forbidden incantations I'd overheard in the dead of night. In that moment, a horrifying possibility struck me. The old man wasn't just a reclusive eccentric. He had forged a dark pact with something beyond our world, something that demanded a terrible price. I shared my findings with Jamie, whose initial skepticism slowly dissolved into visible terror. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, mirrored the storm of emotions that churned within me. Our once safe haven now felt invaded by an invisible, malevolent force, a force that was methodically dismantling our sense of normalcy. That day, the weight of an ancient curse seemed to press upon us, sealing our fate in a cycle of relentless horror. One clear night under a full moon, I couldn't resist the pull of the unknown any longer. Drawn by an irresistible compulsion, I ventured out to the neighbor's house while the rest of the neighborhood slept. In the eerie glow of moonlight, I witnessed the old man performing a disturbing ritual on his creaking porch. Clutching a weathered, tattered book, he chanted in a low, guttural tone that sent shivers down my spine. His arms moved in deliberate, almost mechanical motions, as if guiding an unseen force. Every word he uttered carried a weight of ancient sorrow and dread that resonated deep within me. I lingered in the shadows, careful not to be seen, as I documented every unsettling detail in my notebook. The incantations, punctuated by the rustling of dry leaves and the distant hum of the city, felt like a forbidden dialogue with a dark realm. At one point, our eyes met across the distance, a brief, haunting connection that seemed to plead for understanding or perhaps warn me to retreat. I felt an overwhelming sense of violation, as though I were intruding upon a secret that the night itself had sworn to keep hidden. Returning home, the oppressive silence was almost suffocating. Jamie noticed the haunted look etched on my face and tried to comfort me, but words felt inadequate. The intensity of that nocturnal ritual lingered in the air, transforming our once comforting home into a prison of dread. It was clear that the old man's nightly ceremonies were not isolated acts of madness, but rather part of a larger, more sinister plan that threatened to consume us both. In the days that followed, our once peaceful nights devolved into a relentless barrage of terror. Shadows began to creep along our walls, twisting and contorting into ghastly shapes that danced in the periphery of our vision. Disembodied voices whispered unintelligible secrets, echoing through the halls of our home as if carried by the very wind. Every night, the sinister influence from the neighbor's house tightened its grip on our lives. I could feel the silent watcher's malevolence seeping into every corner, transforming our sanctuary into a stage for unending horror. One night, while I sat alone in the flickering candlelight of our living room, an overwhelming dread washed over me. The room seemed to darken as if absorbing every ounce of warmth and hope. I could almost sense the presence of a dark force lurking just beyond the threshold, its murmur echoing in the silence. My hands trembled as I recalled the symbols and rituals from the neighbor's property, and I began to understand that our lives were now intertwined with an ancient, unforgiving curse. Each creak of the floorboard and each gust of wind carried the weight of impending doom. Desperation drove me to scour every available resource for a way to break the cycle. I combed through local archives, old newspapers, and even sought out whispers from the few brave neighbors who remembered the old man's history. Yet every clue only deepened the mystery, reinforcing the belief that the Dark Pact was far older and more powerful than I had ever imagined. With every discovery, the terror grew, and I realized that escaping the Silent Watcher's curse might be a futile dream. Our lives were now a perpetual dance with the macabre, bound by an ancient horror that showed no mercy. The final confrontation came on a tempestuous night, when the storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos in our hearts. Jamie and I, driven to the edge by fear and desperation, decided that we could no longer hide from the looming terror. Clad in determination despite our trembling hands, we ventured toward the neighbor's house, the howling wind and pounding rain our only companions. As we neared the crumbling porch, the old man emerged from the shadows, his eyes burning with an unearthly light that pierced the gloom. In that charged moment, everything crystallized. The old man's dark pact was not merely a relic of the past, but but an active, malevolent force threatening our very souls. What unfolded next felt like a surreal nightmare. The old man's voice, now echoing with a haunting resonance, recited forbidden lore that sent shockwaves through our hearts. His words painted a grim picture of sacrifices made and souls lost to an ancient entity, a pact forged in the depths of despair. As I listened, paralyzed by terror, spectral images of past victims flickered around us, phantom echoes of those who had been ensnared by the curse. The weight of that revelation was unbearable, and I felt the bitter sting of regret and fear as the darkness pressed in closer, its intentions unmistakable and cruel. In the aftermath, silence reigned, punctuated only by the relentless patter of rain on the deserted street. The old man had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving us with a lingering chill and an unsettling void. Jamie and I retreated into our home, forever scarred by that night's revelations. The encounter left us with more questions than answers, a haunting reminder that some horrors never truly end. Even now, I live with the perpetual dread of that silent watcher, a curse that may one day return to claim what it began. My name is Sarah, a single mother trying to rebuild my life in a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Springfield, Illinois. At first glance, the neighborhood seemed like any other friendly American community. Well-kept lawns, neighborly waves, and invitations to weekend potlucks. One family, in particular, caught my attention, always smiling, ever helpful, as if they had stepped out of a family portrait. Their cordiality was almost too perfect, a shining example of suburban harmony. Yet, something in their eyes hinted at secrets too deep for casual conversation. In the early evenings, while I was preparing dinner for my 8-year-old son, I'd noticed the neighbors exchanging warm greetings with a hint of mystery behind their grins. Their interactions were always punctuated by a certain practiced cheerfulness that felt rehearsed rather than natural. I couldn't help but wonder if their smiles masked something darker, a secret kept behind a facade of everyday kindness. Even their home, a beautifully maintained colonial house, exuded an eerie calm that belied the unease growing in my heart. One night, as the clock neared midnight, I heard soft murmurs drifting from their direction. It wasn't the sound of a late-night conversation or the gentle hum of a television. It was something else, low, rhythmic, almost like an incantation. I paused in the kitchen, heart pounding, and listened as the whispers faded into the darkness. That night, a seed of dread was planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that behind those friendly smiles lay a secret that could shatter the illusion of suburban bliss. In the days that followed, unsettling occurrences began to puncture the quiet normality of my routine. At dusk, I would catch fleeting glimpses of the neighbor family gathering near their porch under the glow of flickering porch lights. Their voices, usually masked by laughter during daylight, turned into hushed, urgent whispers once darkness fell. I started to notice that the seemingly innocent murmurings seemed almost ritualistic, like a secret language exchanged in the dead of night. It was as if the air itself vibrated with suppressed dread. Unable to ignore these anomalies, I began to document everything in a small journal. I noted the exact times of the strange sounds, the peculiar movements at their windows, and even the subtle changes in their demeanor. My curiosity grew alongside my fear. Every friendly wave in the morning was now tinged with the foreboding of what might happen when night fell. Despite my instinct to retreat, I found myself drawn inexorably toward the mystery behind their constant smiles. One particularly stormy night, I stepped outside after hearing a crescendo of hushed voices that seemed to echo off the empty streets. The rain pounded the pavement as I inched closer to their house, heart hammering in my chest. In the fleeting lightning flashes, I saw silhouettes moving in unnerving synchrony around their backyard. For a brief moment, the pleasant facade shattered completely, revealing shadows that danced like sinister marionettes. That night, the whispers became a persistent reminder that some secrets are best left unspoken. My investigation into the neighbors' behavior led me down a path I never thought I'd tread. Late one evening, driven by equal parts trepidation and determination, I crept along the side of their property, careful to stay hidden under the cover of darkness. As I peered through a gap in the fence, my eyes fell upon something that made my blood run cold. Strange symbols etched onto the wooden frame of their porch. These weren't random doodles, but deliberate carvings, reminiscent of occult sigils I'd only seen in obscure folklore books. They seemed to pulse with a hidden energy, as though they were conduits for an ancient, malevolent force. Every detail of that night seared itself into my memory. I recalled how the flickering lights cast eerie shadows over those carvings, making them seem almost alive. The symbols combined with the soft, rhythmic chanting I later deciphered as part of a clandestine ritual confirmed my darkest suspicions. I began to suspect that the neighbor family was more than just an unusually cheerful bunch. They were custodians of a forbidden secret, using their cordiality as a mask to hide sinister practices. The symbols hinted at a pact forged long ago, one that involved sacrifices and the summoning of a power that defied explanation. Over the following days, my sense of isolation deepened. I would pass by their home during the day and feel an inexplicable chill, as if I were marked by the very secrets they guarded. Every smile they offered now felt like a rehearsed performance meant to disarm and deceive. I shared my unease with a close friend, but even then, the rational part of me struggled to accept that such occult rituals could exist in our seemingly mundane world. Yet the evidence was undeniable, and the quiet whispers of the symbols haunted my every step, urging me to uncover the full truth behind the neighbor's perfectly polished facade. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected invitation to a neighborhood barbecue hosted by the very family whose secrets had begun to consume my thoughts. Though apprehensive, I accepted, desperate for any opportunity to understand the darkness behind their smiles. The event was held in their immaculate backyard, where string lights cast a soft glow over carefully arranged tables and freshly cut hedges. As I mingled with the other residents, I couldn't help but notice how every interaction with them exuded an almost too perfect warmth, as if choreographed for appearances. The gathering began pleasantly enough, with neighbors exchanging pleasantries and laughter filling the air. But as dusk settled, subtle changes occurred. The tone of conversation shifted, and I noticed the hosts exchanging knowing glances with one another. In quiet corners, away from the jovial clamor, I overheard hushed remarks that hinted at hidden rituals and unspoken pacts. At one point, while serving myself a drink, I caught a glimpse of an ornate object resting on a side table. A small, intricately carved talisman that seemed to shimmer with an eerie light. Its presence was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Unable to shake my growing dread, I decided to stay and observe a bit longer. As the night deepened, the friendly veneer began to crumble. I saw the family retreat into a shadowed part of their garden, where the soft murmur of voices turned into something almost like a chant. I lingered at a distance, my pulse quickening with each step they took. The stark contrast between the lively barbecue and the secretive ritual unfolding nearby was too great to ignore. That night, the invitation became a turning point, thrusting me into a realm where the boundary between neighborly kindness and occult horror blurred beyond recognition. The following week, the quiet streets of our suburb were plunged into an atmosphere of palpable dread. Night after night, I witnessed an unsettling pattern. The family gathering under the cloak of darkness, their movements orchestrated like a well-rehearsed performance. Driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth, I began to stake out their home, armed only with my journal and a trembling resolve. One fateful night, the air was thick with anticipation as I watched them congregate in their backyard. The scene was surreal. A circle of figures lit only by the intermittent glow of lanterns and the silvery gleam of the moon, performing a ritual that defied reason. As I hid behind a copse of trees, I observed the family members assume positions that mirrored those of ancient practitioners. Their synchronized movements, punctuated by guttural chants, resonated with a power that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. At the center of their gathering lay an elaborate arrangement of candles and cryptic symbols drawn on the ground. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. These weren't mere superstitious acts, but deliberate ceremonies aimed at harnessing a dark, primordial force. The air vibrated with a malignant energy, and every whispered word carried the weight of centuries-old secrets. I felt as if I were witnessing an event that could unleash a terror far beyond my wildest nightmares. The intensity of that night left me shaken to my core. The ritual wasn't isolated to a single moment. It was an ongoing affair, a cyclical dance with malevolence that had been carefully concealed behind welcoming smiles. I retreated into the shadows, my mind reeling with images of the macabre spectacle. The realization hit me with brutal force. My own life, along with the lives of those in our once peaceful neighborhood, was at risk. With every beat of my heart, I sensed that the dark pact binding these neighbors was inching closer to unleashing its full horror upon us all. The final night arrived like a prelude to chaos. The storm that had been gathering for days finally broke, unleashing torrents of rain that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. I found myself unable to sleep, haunted by the visions of the past week. Determined to confront the evil that had invaded my world, I gathered my courage and made my way toward the neighbor's house, knowing that this might be my last stand. The streets, slick with rain and lit by sporadic flashes of lightning, bore an eerie silence that foreshadowed the terror to come. As I approached their home, the familiar cordial smiles of the daytime were replaced by a chilling, spectral glow emanating from within. I could see the family assembling in their backyard once more, their figures merging with the shadows and the raging storm. This time, however, there was no hiding behind half-truths or polite conversation. The ritual was in full terrifying display. I watched in paralyzed horror as they chanted louder, their voices rising in a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. In that moment, the line between the natural and the supernatural disintegrated, leaving me face to face with an ancient evil that had been nurtured by their secret practices. The confrontation that followed was a blur of terror and despair. I attempted to call out, to warn anyone who might be near, but my voice was swallowed by the tempest and the unyielding power of the ritual. In the chaos, I stumbled backward, my heart pounding as I realized that the dark force they sought to harness was now directed toward me. Whether I escaped that night or became a permanent part of their unholy pact remains a mystery. All I know is that the memory of those sinister smiles, those hidden secrets, will forever haunt me. A reminder that behind every friendly gesture can lie a nightmare waiting to be unleashed. In the peaceful suburbs of Rockford, Illinois, where tidy lawns and smiling neighbors are the norm, something sinister lurks beneath the calm. Every evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, an unsettling hush falls over the block. Among the residents is Mrs. Evelyn Harper, an elderly woman known for her reserved manners and soft-spoken nature. Her home, a modest colonial with faded charm, seems inconspicuous at first glance. Yet there's an air of mystery surrounding her. Whispers in the wind hint at secrets buried deep within her past, secrets that even the most inquisitive residents dare not explore. Young neighbor Daniel, a curious college student troubled by recent inexplicable disappearances in the community, finds himself drawn to Evelyn's peculiar behavior. Late one evening, while returning from a late-night study session, Daniel notices a faint light flickering through the lace curtains of her home. The sight, combined with hushed murmurs emanating from behind closed doors, sends shivers down his spine. Intrigued and unnerved, he begins to wonder if there's more to Evelyn than meets the eye. The calm of the neighborhood, once taken for granted, now feels like a delicate mask concealing a deep, unfolding horror. Haunted by both personal loss and the unspoken fears of his neighbors, Daniel resolves to uncover the truth. Every smile he exchanges during daytime encounters now seems to hide a secret. With each passing dusk, the silence of the night grows heavier, a prelude to something ominous that Daniel cannot yet name. As the clock chimes midnight, he stands outside his window, silently vowing to follow the clues that will soon lead him into a darkness far beyond his imagination. Late one autumn evening, Daniel's growing curiosity pushes him to begin discreetly observing Evelyn's nightly routine. From the relative safety of his own backyard, he watches as the elderly woman shuffles slowly to her back door, a heavy shawl draped around her shoulders. In the pale glow of a single street lamp, she appears almost ghost-like, her face partially hidden in shadow. Daniel's heart pounds as he notes the deliberate way she arranges objects on a small table by the door, a cluster of odd trinkets and antique relics that seem out of place in a typical suburban home. Over several nights, he documents every detail. The soft, almost imperceptible chanting that begins as soon as she closes the door. The subtle movements that hint at a ritual in progress, and the sudden, inexplicable gusts of wind that disturb the otherwise still night air. Each observation reinforces his growing conviction that Evelyn is not merely an eccentric recluse, but a keeper of ancient, forbidden secrets. Daniel's notebook fills with meticulous sketches and handwritten notes as he pieces together the fragments of a dark narrative that links her to the recent mysterious vanishings in the neighborhood. The more Daniel watches, the more he feels that the night itself is complicit in the unfolding terror. The gentle rustling of leaves, the eerie silence punctuated only by distant echoes of whispered incantations, and the unsettling interplay of light and darkness create a tapestry of dread that grips his every thought. It becomes clear that the ritual she performs is no benign habit. It is a deliberate act that opens a door to a realm of unknown, malevolent forces. With a mix of dread and determination, Daniel vows to delve deeper into the mystery, even as the night grows darker around him. Driven by an insatiable need for answers, Daniel embarks on a quest to uncover Evelyn's history, convinced that her secret rituals are rooted in a long-forgotten pact. His research takes him to the town's small library and local archives, where he sifts through yellowed newspapers and brittle records. Slowly, a chilling picture emerges. Decades ago, the Harper family faced a calamity that threatened to destroy them, and in a desperate bid for survival, Evelyn, then a young woman, entered into an unholy agreement with forces beyond human. The pact, meant to save her loved ones, has cursed her lineage ever since, binding her to a recurring cycle of darkness and terror. As Daniel reads the faded accounts of the Harper family's misfortune, he begins to understand the true cost of that ancient bargain. The texts speak of rituals performed under the cloak of night, of promises made to entities that dwell in a realm of shadows, and of a price that must be paid in blood and suffering. The revelations send chills down his spine as he realizes that the inexplicable disappearances in the neighborhood might be collateral damage from a ritual that has continued unabated for decades. Every detail, every cryptic symbol he uncovers, confirms that the once revered family is now ensnared in a web of supernatural torment. Haunted by the tragic history of the Harpers, Daniel becomes increasingly convinced that the key to ending the cycle of terror lies in confronting the very pact that doomed them. Yet, the deeper he delves, the more he senses that some truths are better left buried. The library's musty silence and the faded ink on ancient pages seem to whisper warnings of dire consequences for those who dare to pry too deeply. With a heavy heart and trembling resolve, Daniel prepares himself to face a darkness that has haunted his community for far too long, a darkness that grows ever more potent with each passing night. One fateful night, the full moon casts a ghostly light over the neighborhood, transforming familiar streets into a surreal, otherworldly landscape. Daniel, his curiosity now bordering on obsession, positions himself near Evelyn's home, determined to witness the ritual firsthand. As midnight approaches, he sees her emerge from the shadows, moving with an eerie precision toward a secluded part of her overgrown garden. There, beneath an ancient oak whose gnarled branches seem to claw at the sky, Evelyn arranges a collection of peculiar artifacts, a set of weathered candles, a bowl filled with dark liquid, and several cryptic talismans. The stage is set for a ritual that promises to shatter the boundary between worlds. With the first whisper of incantation, the air thickens, and the temperature seems to drop as if the night itself is exhaling a long-held breath. Daniel watches, transfixed and terrified, as Evelyn's lips move in a silent chant, her eyes glazing over in a trance-like state. The flickering candles begin to burn with an unearthly flame, casting grotesque shadows that writhe and twist in unnatural forms. It is as though the very fabric of reality is bending, making room for a presence that has long been confined to whispers and legends. Every detail, the rustle of leaves, the soft hum of an ancient language, the pulsating glow around the ritual space, converges into a moment of pure, unadulterated dread. As the ritual intensifies, a shimmering portal appears where the garden meets the night sky, a swirling vortex of dark energy that seems to beckon with silent malice. Daniel's heart races. He feels both repulsion and an inexplicable pull toward the other side. The boundary between his familiar world and a realm of unspeakable horror is on the verge of collapsing. In that electrifying moment, it becomes painfully clear that Evelyn's nightly ceremonies are not isolated acts of desperation, but the culmination of a curse that has festered for generations. The portal, a gaping maw into an abyss of eternal night, promises calamity not only for her but for the entire community. In the days following that ominous night, the atmosphere in Rockford grows palpably heavier, as though the town itself is burdened with an ancient, relentless curse. Strange occurrences begin to plague the neighborhood, animals behaving erratically, inexplicable power outages, and a series of unexplained vanishings that send shockwaves through the community. Daniel, now painfully aware of the dire consequences of the ritual, races against time to warn his neighbors. Though his words are met with a mix of disbelief and quiet terror, the once peaceful streets transform into a stage for a slowly unfolding nightmare, where every shadow hides a threat and every silence whispers impending doom. Haunted by visions of the swirling portal and the dark force it heralds, Daniel finds himself caught between the desire to expose the truth and the paralyzing fear that the curse may be irreversible. Late at night, as he walks the empty sidewalks, the echoes of Evelyn's incantations reverberate in his ears. His mind becomes a battleground of rational thought versus the supernatural evidence he has witnessed. With each passing night, the sense of foreboding intensifies, and the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur to the point where Daniel can no longer distinguish between them. The curse, once an abstract legend, now manifests in every unexplained phenomenon and every terrified whisper among the residents. Determined to find a way to halt the spread of this malevolent force, Daniel begins seeking out any remnants of old lore or counter-rituals that might reverse the pact. His desperate search leads him to forgotten corners of the internet, obscure texts in local antique shops, and even the hesitant recollections of elderly townsfolk. Yet, every clue points to the same grim conclusion: the ancient agreement that saved Evelyn's family has woven a web of darkness too vast to untangle. The community's fate now hangs by a thread, and Daniel is left grappling with the realization that sometimes the price of salvation is an endless descent into terror. The relentless curse reaches its zenith. The night of reckoning descends upon Rockford with an intensity that chills the soul. Daniel, now a reluctant chronicler of horrors, prepares for a final confrontation with the dark forces unleashed by Evelyn's ritual. Under a sky crackling with distant thunder and the ominous glow of a swollen moon, he makes his way to her property, determined to put an end to the terror that has gripped the community. Every step feels weighted by the accumulated dread of countless sleepless nights, and the once familiar streets now appear as a labyrinth of shadows and forewarnings. In the eerie stillness that envelops the neighborhood, Daniel finds Evelyn in the midst of her final ceremony, a desperate attempt, perhaps, to control the malevolent force she has summoned. Surrounded by the flickering remnants of the ritual, her frail figure is illuminated by a ghostly light that seems to emanate from within. The air trembles with the resonance of ancient power as Evelyn's voice, strained and laden with regret, echoes into the void. Daniel watches in horror as the swirling portal pulses ominously behind her, its dark energies threatening to spill forth and consume everything in their path. In that charged moment, the full scale of the curse becomes unmistakably clear. With trembling resolve, Daniel steps forward, his voice barely a whisper as he issues a final warning to the unseen forces, a plea for mercy, for an end to the cycle of destruction. Yet, even as his words fade into the night, a profound silence answers, a silence that speaks of irrevocable loss, and the inexorable power of ancient curses. The final confrontation leaves Daniel with a haunting realization. Some pacts, once made, bind not only the soul of one, but the destiny of many. As the night reclaims its dominion over Rockford, the community is left to grapple with the dark legacy of Evelyn's secret. A legacy that will forever echo in the silence of the night. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to stay informed when the next video comes out. And tell me, what did you think of today's stories? See you in the next video.